Good day, everybody. My name is Vishal Mathur. I'm the Chief Commercial Officer at the Telecom Infra Project. Lovely to meet you guys. I have a colleague in arms with me, Jagadish. Say hi, Jagadish.
Hello, everybody.
Hello. Thank you very much. So, everybody, this is Tip's very own podcast where we're going to do a bit of a show and tell of companies that are movers and shakers in the telco industry or broader than telco as well. Today, we want to do a bit of a deeper dive into looking into how telcos want to be a part of the AI value chain. Now, bit of context here. We know that some of the telecom operators are already investing in compute and data center infrastructure. Some of them are actually really trying to understand how do I get the best out of inferencing workloads and develop the right sort of approach on orchestrating that. Some of them are also in the space of wanting to be a part of the build of applications that they can take to market. What I'd love to do is do a bit of a deeper dive into a company that has came to FYUZ in 2025 in Dublin, Centific, and Jagadish is the man who runs the operation there. But well, let's talk about Centific, and then what we'll do is round up with how Tip is going to take your story and others to the table in FYUZ 2026. So, Jagadish, please introduce yourself and introduce Centific for us.
Absolutely, Vish. Thanks for having me on the podcast here. Real pleasure. Hi, everybody. My name is Jagadish Garimella. I run one of the business units here at Centific, which is centered around how do we bring AI to operationalize, public sector entities and smart cities at large. As Centific, we're at a very interesting intersection of the AI ecosystem or value chain, as you put it, Vishal. Right? We help organizations move from AI experiments to AI deployments at production grade and at scale, essentially, right? We've had a front row seat having worked with a lot of the large language models, and we've seen, the full spectrum of how AI has become what it has become now. And with that heritage and with that background, we are able to help organizations move quickly from experiments to scale. What we mean by that is, if you think about in the context of public, sector, think airports, venues, etc. It isn't just about processing data post facto from a traditional analytics platform, right? How do you really operationalize that data to make decisions in real time or near real time? The way we do that is we think about it from the end-to-end journey of the AI value chain, from data preparation to model building to deploying models on the edge and running them at production grade quality 24/7, which is very much needed for the vertical that I just talked about, right? So we spend a lot of time building this ecosystem, because if you have to really take advantage of AI in today's world, an ecosystem is very much necessary. And TIP, or TIP is very much orchestrating that ecosystem with telcos at the center of it, right? So from our perspective, cities already have a lot of data, right? If you walk around a city, you've got, thousands of cameras, millions of sensors, traffic cameras. Every one of those is generating a lot of data. Where we're trying to take is moving the organizations from saying not using the data at all or using it post facto to how do you use it in real time, in near real time. In that context, telcos play a critical role, because they already have the necessary infrastructure to help move into today's era, which is process the data where the data is being generated, which is at the edge.
Okay, brilliant. Thank you very much for that intro. So picking up on from pilot to scale, picking up on how do you actually orchestrate and leverage data in the right way?
Mhm.
How do you actually really gravitate around the fact that you talked about public sector and smart cities as a sort of a symposium of great data that is available? How do you really abstract that and use it and exploit it? And at the same time, how do telcos become a part of that value chain as well? Let's talk about telcos, if you don't mind, Jagdish, because as you quite rightly said, TIP is there at the center of trying to facilitate this journey for the telco ecosystem. What does it really mean for telecom operators that are becoming a part of this AI-centric network space? They have connectivity, they have context, i.e., customers and they are investing in AI infrastructure. What does it really mean from your perspective?
Yeah. So when we talk to a lot of customers, right, and when we look at AI centricity, most often it is confused with, hey, it means running large models and even larger models. But it is more about, where do you process the data? How do you
Hmm.
process the data? And how quickly you're able to orchestrate all of this in a timely manner. To me, that's what AI centricity is all about. And you rightly pointed out that telcos already have the infrastructure, right? Whether it is private 5G, edge, fiber, all their core competencies. And with the maturity of all of these technologies, and as we're moving into 6G, and telcos investing into the data center and the distributed infrastructure, also sometimes referred to as neo cloud, right? This is Telcos are becoming a core piece of the puzzle when it comes to AI centricity, especially in the space we're talking about, right?
I,
Where
yeah,
edge processing capabilities become very much a core need for us to be able to bring some of these solutions and platforms to life, more so because the operational need is to respond to these, in without much latency, with a lot of reliability, and governance becomes a huge part of the equation, especially when data sovereignty is either needed, either to keep it contained within a country, a municipality, county, whatever the requirements is.
I get it. Absolutely. And actually, this links nicely with discussions we've been having in our tip board, which is basically, how do operators manage the AI or inferencing workloads that would be coming into their maybe distributed compute infrastructure? Because actually, if you think about it right now, many applications could be handled in a central data center. But actually, over time, if you start moving towards physical AI based sort of applications, you may need edge based compute. But then there's a trade off, right? There's a trade off between the amount of investment cost, the
Mhm.
performance that you need on compute latency, and actually the type of compute that you need as well. It may not all be GPU, it could be CPU as well. But anyway, that's just a bit of context. In TIP, we have a program that is actually kicking off in that space. What let me get back to you. You talked about AI centricity and telcos being a part of that. And having an orchestration of this is quite key. Why does it matter specifically for public sector and smart cities? I mean, you alluded to that at the beginning, but a little bit more.
Yeah, absolutely. So if you look at the entities in the public sector, smart cities, they're very different than traditional enterprises, right? Where it's not about applications, it's not about workloads in a traditional manner. We're dealing with physical environments. We're dealing with real world, right? Where digital world meets the real world, and that is a big difference between traditional enterprises that have relied on cloud as an infrastructure. And again, the conversation here is not about telco infrastructure replacing clouds. It is
Hmm.
how does one complement another,
Got it.
and that becomes a key point of differentiation and understanding here, because as we talked about, data needs to be processed where it is or close enough to where it's being generated so that you're able to take advantage of all of that being data being generated and being leveraged for operational needs in that physical environments.
Yeah. Can you give me a concrete example?
Yeah, absolutely. So, we've recently worked with, and I won't name the telco in this equation because we haven't, taken permission from them, but it's one of the large telcos that we've leveraged their existing network. And this is a city wide deployment, which has got, think of fixed cameras, think of mobile cameras, think of sensors, traffic cameras, all of that features into the conversation that we're talking about, right? And the operational need there is to be able to process all of this data, ingest all of this data, to provide an operational layer for us to be able to serve the law enforcement agencies, to talk, utilities, public works. Across the city spectrum, there is a need for us to provide the insights, the necessary alerts, actions, as well as cross agency orchestration that is needed. In this example, we had to rely on the private 5G to ensure that there is low latency when we are processing the data and are being able to, let's say, for example, there is an incident happening on the road and you're able to respond to it in a matter of milliseconds as opposed to, several minutes later. So data sovereignty was a key requirement here as well
Understood.
because of the citizen involvement and so on and so forth. And governance was a key aspect to it. So we had to leverage both the edge capabilities, but also regional compute capacity for us to ensure that we're able to cater to all of the aforementioned requirements.
Okay, and just maybe to reiterate for everyone's understanding, Centific's role in that example was to provide the platform effectively and the
That is correct.
orchestration.
So, yes. So, we are the AI operational layer that sits above the infrastructure layer to be able to orchestrate all of this and bring it to life, right?
Very
From
good.
ingesting the data, processing the data, as well as generating those operational insights, alerts, and enabling actions. So we are the AI operational layer that sits on top of the infrastructure layer here.
Very good. And actually, maybe even your example helps me to answer this next question. But why can't we just do this all through hyperscalers?
Yeah. Yeah. And I kind of touched upon that and at the risk of repeating a little bit here. So in this case, sending all of that massive amounts of data to cloud was both cost prohibitive, but also latency laden, if you will. Right.
Exactly.
So for
Got
that
it.
reason, it's a combination of hybrid infrastructure plus the edge infrastructure that we had to really put into play to ensure that the requirements that I talked about from latency, governance, data sovereignty, as well as, we've got to think of FinOps here as well to ensure that we're only sending small amounts or really required amounts of data to the cloud and not the whole data lock, stock, and barrel, because that can be fairly cost prohibitive.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that's a reasonable assumption to make and logical that the type of data that we're talking about and the latency requirements does mean that, and the cost does mean public cloud is not always going to be the right answer. A hybrid cloud approach, maybe there's certain on-prem, edge-based sort of development or infrastructure required, or neo cloud or whatever it might be. So I guess even in this example where you're talking about a city-wide infrastructure connected, covered, but also then having the AI inferencing requirement set does require that hybrid architecture generally.
It does require, yes, and that is where you're able to truly leverage the power of the infrastructure layer as opposed to being limited by what we could do from a cost as well as from a latency perspective.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, you've explained how Centific fits into that example, but let me sort of take it another step further. Can you see the manifestation of, your role, Centific, and maybe other examples going beyond smart city or public service type of environments?
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. So it is one of the verticals that we serve today. We also have other industries like FSI or healthcare.
Mm,
Logistics is a key vertical for us where regulated data. So some of the commonalities we are seeing is there's a bit of that regulated data which requires a certain amount of data sovereignty. There's a physical world aspect to it, right? And that poses a different set of dynamics and set of real world problems that we need to solve. And if you combine that, the verticals that we've chosen and where telcos could play a real role is because of these two facets
mm,
where we think there is a real value for us to partner with these telcos. And it's not an aspirational state for us. We're actively in conversations with several of them. And we're
brilliant.
about to announce a strategic partnership with one of the large ones, fairly in the short order.
No,
Mhm.
that's very good. And beyond the telcos themselves, whom else, what other type of companies would Centific be partnering with? Naturally, cloud providers or hyperscalers, neo cloud, etc. But are there others that you tend to work with in your
Yep.
ecosystem?
I'm going to call out NVIDIA as a key partner
Of
in
course.
the value chain and ecosystem. We are, I say, a fairly significant partner with them. We also partner with certain OEMs.
Hmm.
Besides cloud partners themselves. AI sometimes require for you to start small and then and scale smart in a lot of different ways. We also partner with SIs who are able to operationalize a lot of these aspects, especially when it comes to bare metal
Providing a
configurations,
service. Yeah.
providing a service as well. So you rightly put it. in this world, an ecosystem is what it takes to bring AI to life.
And do you think we're now in 2026, the beginning of 2026, things have moved on? I mean, everything's at a pace now in terms of the amount of investment in data center as well. What's different compared to a few years ago? Why is it working for you now?
I'd say a couple of things, right? One, the vision around, had always been there, some way, shape, or form, that we have the infrastructure, let's leverage this infrastructure, which is critical infrastructure in a lot of different ways. The vision had existed, but it was not always clear as to how to implement that vision. Now, thanks to the advancements in AI, I think it is becoming more and more clear how to leverage AI. The outcomes that AI can deliver is becoming clearer in a lot of people's minds, because most engagements don't see the daylight is because they get stuck in the experiment phase because there is simply no ROI or no defined ROI. So I would attribute that there is clarity in terms of ROI being able to be defined properly. The infrastructure is matching the needs of that vision. So we're at that intersection, and that's why I believe that now we're ready to fully take advantage of what the vision that already existed, but everything had finally caught up to it. The tool sets have become more mature now. So it's a culmination of all of the above.
Very good. Okay, so there's reality now in terms of it's not a vision, and the markets aren't just putting a number against AI based on just hypothesis, but it's actual practical, real solutions that can be delivered that actually will generate value and economic value for those who are involved in the value chain itself. That's fantastic. Okay,
If I may say,
yeah,
so, right, we lead with ROI conversation first. It is
good.
not necessarily to say, hey, hey, look at this new AI shiny object. We tend to lead with ROI, and this is what AI can deliver for you. And that is one of the reasons why we are seeing more speed now and more willingness to adopt AI than before.
Yeah, absolutely, Jagdish. I mean, again, I've got a very selfish telco-centric view of the world, but perhaps at an industry viewpoint, this industry or the telco operator industry has always been suffering as an institutional industry. High OpEx, CapEx to sales ratios that need to be, maintained, but still a regulated service which has coverage obligations. But AI is now being adopted in to try and drive some transformation, whether it's in sales or customer ops. Actually leveraging the triangulation between connectivity or advanced connectivity, inferencing capability and distributed compute, and then the manifestation of applications that either optimize network provision or actually help to generate revenue is the starting point. That's the block that we're now really wanting to open up, basically. And I think the story you're telling is very impassioned, but also very specific, and it's very discreet about how telcos really can be leveraging their capabilities and driving real value through this mechanism. What's coming next for you, Jagdish? And then I would like to round up with FYUZ as well, if you don't mind. What's your
Yeah.
next thing?
For us at Centific, we're doubling down on the pace with which we want to make AI a reality for our customers, and we are also accelerating our partnership conversations to make them more real. Because as we talked about, the near cloud is a very real conversation. And for us, it comes down to both from a training aspect to be able to build our models and run them at scale, but also use them in real world environments like we spoke about. So we're excited for the rest of the 2026. I would stay away from any predictions beyond that at this point, because the pace at which AI is moving, it's kind of hard to predict.
Absolutely. Thank you very much, Jagdish. And thank you for coming to Dublin last year to our FYUZ event. I know NVIDIA wanted to bring you up on stage, showcase what Centific can do. We want to do more of that this year in Seattle. We're again running FYUZ in between November the 3rd and 5th then. But what we want to do actually is have a slightly different track on how we're bringing innovation to the telco industry. So certainly this story is part of that. And we want to campaign that through to the point that we want to invite you and your peers in the industry that have very innovative approaches on capturing the value of AI to FYUZ. We'll have an innovation campaign. We'll want to bring companies of your size to the table and actually allow you to bring conversation to head with telcos as well as with other partners and really try and drive forward your ideologies there. Hope to see you there at FYUZ in November. It's in Seattle. Look out for any opportunities to be on stage or sponsoring through.
Yeah, absolutely. We enjoyed our time last year in Dublin. This year happens to be where our corporate headquarters is, so obviously it's a lot more convenient. Look forward to being there for sure. Just in the matter of last November to this November, I'm sure the conversations would be much more impactful about how do we accelerate the ROI more so than where do we see AI really playing. I think that was more the sentiment a few months ago. Even just from there to now, the conversations have shifted. So I'm confident that we're talking about how do we increase or accelerate the ROI when we meet in November this year.
Yeah, Jagdish, I absolutely agree with you. And in fact, our agenda would be very much more about the practical and pragmatic approaches of embracing building the right distributed compute infrastructure and showing how that can manage different AI workloads through to how do we actually capture the value and what are the applications or innovations out there that should be harnessed to do that. Thank you very much, Jagdish. Today, I really enjoyed this conversation. It was very enlightening about what Centific does, and the examples that you've given as well are very proof points that there is a real value capture there.
Thank you. My pleasure being here. Thank you, Vishal.
Take care.